Keith Grossman, fantastic to see you on Real Vision. How the devil are you?
I'm good. How are you, my friend?
I can't complain. As we just talked about off camera, I'm in the Caribbean. What can I complain about?
And I mean, the easiest job in the world has to be a weatherman where you are.
Today's going to be warm and sunny. Keith, before we start, just tell people what you do now, and then I want to go back in time and get a bit of your journey here.
Sure. My name's Keith Grossman. I'm the president of Time. I joined Time about 3 years ago. And really, it was to take this storied brand that just turned 99 a few weeks ago, and make sure that it evolves for the next 100 years. And it had just been brought under new ownership by Mark and Lynn Benioff. Mark being the CEO of Salesforce and Lynn his wife. And they were concerned. They just were concerned about the state of journalism, the state of the media industry, and how can we make sure that a brand like Time that's been relatively objective and centrist, can survive and evolve. And over that time, we've been sort of breathing life into it and evolving it and resourcing it, and building different extensions off the brand. And my responsibility is evolving into focusing primarily on Web3 development, which has been a relatively new expansion. We're almost a year in next week into Web3, which in Web3 years, as you know, is essentially like 100 years, right? And prior to Time, and this will now make sense, is I was at Bloomberg for 5 years, where I rose to be the global chief revenue officer. And prior to that, I spent most of my time at Condé Nast for 12 years, where I worked on Wired and Ars Technica, and briefly on the launch of Portfolio as a seller. And then, ultimately, the common thread throughout all of my jobs have been changing with trends. And so, like with Wired, we took it from a primarily print revenue brand to a primarily digital revenue brand. With Wired, we then launched the tablet edition that Steve Jobs held up and said, this is the brand. This is how you need to launch on the tablet. With Ars Technica, we looked at sort of the community engagement and realized that we could tap into data to predict if an article would go viral or not, and invented what's called the Ars Accelerator, which won a Project Isaac Award for project inventions, media inventions. And grew the brand 85% in revenue in 1 year. It was amazing. And then at Bloomberg, the challenge was how do we take this complex matrixed organization and turn it into a focused media company? And ultimately, as we started to do that, we also launched QuickTake, which is their social mobile video network. We had no ambitions of taking Time into crypto, no ambitions of taking Time into Web3. I don't know, like there's this great philosopher, Raoul, Mike Tyson, who has this quote that, everyone has a plan until you're punched in the mouth. And, like we had our view and where we were going to take it. And, 2020 came around and we saw shifts take place that none of us expected to see, as it related to consumer privacy, as it related to online ownership versus online rentership, as it related to communities and other sort of core human attributes, as it related to income redistribution. And we realized, like, wow, like we could play in this crypto space, in this NFT space really well. And the reason at the end of the day is it's just a spot that I love personally. And I was able to realize how I could take my personal passion and apply it to my professional
So
responsibility.
let's talk about that before we get into what you're doing and, and the journey of getting everybody across the line at Time. What was your journey into crypto? How much prior to it did it start, or are you relatively new to it? Give me that story.
So the clean version of that story is I got into crypto in 2013, 2014, like around the time that Wired wrote this article. So when I was at Wired, the editors came and said to me and to my partner, actually, Maya Drazen and also Howard Mittman, they said, you're the business side. We want to write an article about this new digital currency called Bitcoin. And we need $4,600 to buy a computer to mine the Bitcoin. And picture that, Earl, like $4,600 to buy the computer to mine the Bitcoin. So we wrote the check. and the editors of Wired wrote the article about Bitcoin. And that's when I started to invest, initially in crypto.
What did you see in it? What did you think? What was the trigger point for you?
Um, I was in college, a government major, and the biggest choice I made in my life was, do I go into government or do I go into media? And as a government major, I loved government, theoretically, and in college I was interning at Condé Nast, and so like I loved media. I was just having fun in this industry, and I chose at the end of the day. I had two job offers coming out of college. I chose at the end of the day to go into media. But what I liked about crypto was where it played in my sort of personal belief system. I liked the inclusivity of crypto. I liked the decentralization of crypto. I liked that Bitcoin was capped, to be honest, right? And when I really, really started to look at crypto, even more so than dabbling in it from 2014 beyond, personally, was in 2020. And what led me to it was just watching, the world react to COVID, and just a very simple thing taking place, which was, and this is a personal thing, this is not a professional thing, but this on a personal level, seeing the consistent spending on trying to contain COVID, with very little successful outcome taking place over a course of a year that could actionably hold it or contain it. And the insistence of government to say that there was no inflation, I just didn't buy. It was something that, like, it didn't connect with me. And I couldn't make a rational case out of what I was seeing and what I was hearing and what I believed. And so when I looked at the alternatives in my mind, the alternatives were, wow, like this asset class actually makes a lot of sense to me personally as an individual. Now, this is not investment advice. That was just me personally as an individual. I don't have all my money in crypto, but I have some, and I look at that and I take it very serious. The second thing was, the world is a very sad place, right? There's a lot of happiness in the world, but there's also a lot of sadness. And when you look at the way in which crypto fluctuates in a first world country like the United States, you're used to having a stable currency, right? But there's plenty of countries that don't have a stable currency, or there's plenty of countries where people are fleeing. And if you're fleeing the country, there's two things you need. One is you need cash, for your immediate needs, for safety, for water, for food. But you need, you don't need, but I'd rather think that an alternative like crypto is probably a better long-term play if you have to flee and you have to get across a border and then you have to reset your life and reestablish your life somewhere else. It's just, in my mind, as I was watching the news, that's sort of what kept on going through my head. And that was not my media head. That was my media head as an observer, right? But then that was my government mind, and my background saying, wow, this is how I would be playing out all these scenarios if I was to make an investment with my own personal money. And again, not investment advice for anyone else, but how I thought through the scenarios.
The cryptoverse is an incredibly exciting place, and it's going to be absolutely massive. This has been just a small taste of my own personal journey into crypto. Join me for free over on realvision.com/crypto as we discover just what this new world will look like and much more.